Hey everyone, just wanted to make another vlog here about something that I've been thinking a lot about, which is how do you choose the right AI model for the right job? So today what we go over is just how to choose an AI model for your app or website that you might be building, what decisions you should probably be kind of thinking through, and how I went about it for an app I built. So first and foremost, for those that don't know, there's tons of AI models out there. You've probably heard of some of them: OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, X. They all make different AI models now, and each AI model obviously has different specializations and levels of training that it makes it smarter or more specialized at certain tasks. So first thing that you probably need to do when you're selecting a model is just understand what models are available to you. This is generally going to be done through your cloud provider. So if you use something like Google Cloud or AWS, you're going to be able to actually go, and they each have whether it's more or less called a model garden or a listing of what models they can support. And you can see that on Google Cloud, which I use the most, they have their own models. They have pre-trained specialized models. They have open models, which are kind of like models that you kind of host locally and kind of specialize a little bit more. And then they have third-party models, which is if you kind of want to use another provider or company's model. And all of these are different, ways for your app to kind of use AI and kind of tailor the experience that user is going to have based on kind of the intelligence, powering your app. So what I kind of wanted to move into now was just this idea of, how do you choose the right one? So as far as Google goes, they have their Gemini and their models kind of all listed here with model cards. And this is a pretty standard thing that, if you have an AI model, whether it's DeepSeek or Quan or even the popular ones like Grok 4, they're all going to kind of have these model cards associated with them. And when you first see the word model card, you probably think of like a little cue card you hold up and read about. But it's a little misleading. What it really is just it's basically a PDF which standard summarizes what the model is, how it was trained, the data it used, some evaluation metrics, how it performs, as well as kind of its intended usage and limitations. And this is where I really want to focus today. I think that model cards in general don't really give you much direction on intended usage limitations. Especially differentiating, one from another. So for example, the model card for Gemini 2 Flash is here. And if I was to pull up the Gemini, let's say Flash Lite model card, and I go to intended uses now, you can see that maybe it's a little bit smaller. But, I would say that as a developer, as someone who maybe has never built an app before, or new to AI, not the best source of direction here. So what I wanted to go over was more or less how I went about it in my app and actually link some of these models to features that I think are good fits. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is just start a broadcast from my phone. Great. So what you're seeing now is an app that I built called Puck Buddy. And what you're noticing here is that Puck Buddy watches a video of you playing hockey and then grades you to see how you did basically shooting the puck, and kind of looks at your biomechanics as well as how you used like the hockey stick to shoot. So looking at this task, the first thing that I thought from was, what does the AI model actually have to do? So for me, the first thing the AI model has to do is capture data, right? Like it needs to look at the human body and say, is the bottom hand bending correctly? Is the top hand pushing correctly? And all of that requires a certain level of specialization. So when I was kind of looking at different AI models, I found one that Google hosted called MediaPipe. And I saw that it actually had training on recognizing things like shoulder position and knee bend. And this was, a huge win for me, because it meant that, out of the box, I kind of had a framework for tracking different things so that if I wanted to, for example, measure how much the front knee was bending, I could look at 0.26 and kind of see that. So this is an example of me kind of looking at a specialized model that I could use to do a very specialized task. Now, the next thing that I'm going to look at here is coach's feedback. So what you'll notice at coach's feedback is it actually takes that data and it actually generates a report for me. Now, anytime you're kind of taking data and just summarizing it, I generally think that that is a good use case potentially for a flash model. So if we go back to our model cards here, you can see that we have pro, really high-end models, and we have flash models. If you're doing something simple like just creating text and summary, flash is usually a good use case. However, what I learned is that when I was having Gemini Flash generate these summaries for me, even when I would tell it that knee bend of 4.5 meant that the player was not bending their knees very well, it's sometimes confused what those metrics meant. And sometimes those initial metrics really needed a second pass to kind of get cleaned up. So in this instance, where I really needed a lot of critical thinking, I didn't just need it to summarize the metrics or look at a metric and then kind of create a fun sentence. This is kind of where something like a pro model, like Gemini 3 Pro, really shines, because what I'm actually having Puck Buddy do is it's actually using Gemini 3 Pro to not just create a text summary for me, which is great, but it's actually doing things like tool calls and critically thinking about how do these numbers relate to what I'm now seeing in this video. So it's actually doing a second pass of the video, thinking about the biomechanics, looking at the video, and then once again saying, is the knee really bending or was that a misreading? And then generating a report. So for these like multimodal, super complex tasks, that's where you want to use Pro. It's going to be really creative, which means there might be some liability here. So for example, there will be times where I generate this report and something like the knee bend, I'm not particularly sure it was correct for this video. So, again, I can go ahead and check it in my app if it was correct or not. But yeah, he's bending a little bit, but there's some issues there. But, I'm trusting it a lot more. But because I need it to do more heavy duty work, this is the perfect example of a pro model. Now, these are going to be the most expensive API calls you make. So be really careful that your app actually, for example, mine needs multimodal support. I need it to rewatch the video and I need it to creatively and critically think. If I was just doing the text summary, I would probably stick to a flash model. So let's give another example here. So I have a button here called Listen to Coach. And what Listen to Coach does is it actually generates an audio transcript of what has been generated here by Gemini 3. So before I give you the answer, think about what were we just talking about? Okay, so I've taken my break now, and hopefully you've thought about, well, okay, text summary. That means we can use a lighter weight model, and you're exactly right. So the first thing that I need to do here is decide what lightweight model I was going to use. And if I'm literally just passing, this brick of text, this is like maybe going to be, 200 words. And I just need to make like an audio kid-friendly summary of it. This is a good example where you can get away with a flashlight model. Because basically all you're saying is like, take this 200 words, make it 100 words and make it kid-friendly. You don't need much critical thinking for that. You don't even need a full flash model for that, this one. You can get away with the flashlight model. So anytime you're just trying to do quick wins, make your app a little bit more personable, that's where you can get away with flashlight. Now, what you'll notice here is there's actually a second piece of this puzzle, which is the audio piece. So right now I can play my app and it would actually play the audio summary for the child or player who's looking at this. So what you'll notice there is that I actually now need to use an audio generation model. So if you want to actually generate audio, again, for me, I'm using Gemini 2.5 Flash. And again, because that's like the cheapest way to kind of go ahead and do audio, I think, with Google right now. But, there's tons of others. There's 11 Labs. There's, I think, Whisper, whatever you want to do. But again, this isn't a complex dictation task. I'm not trying to have it listen to my entire practice and create a summary. I just need to have it take a 50 to 100 word text block and basically make it audio. Again, that's where you can get away with these really flash and flashlight type models. So even with that one button click, I'm calling two models, and each one has a dedicated reason, and each one I'm trying to save tokens and save money and be efficient. So let's talk about one more feature that my app has, and this feature is the chatbot. So I'm going to kind of, as I kind of analyze this video, go ahead and let you guys guess. But what this chatbot essentially does, just for context, is it's going to look at the biomechanical data we generate. And then after that biomechanical data is generated and it has a coach summary, it has a personality built on it. So basically it's going to be a helpful hockey coach, and I can ask questions about my data. And then, it can actually, use that data to do things like draw up a lesson plan or a game plan. Now, because I want you all to, be learning as you go from this, what you might be thinking at first is this is a chatbot. This can handle a lot of scenarios. It's not just taking something simple and summarizing it. This would be a great use case of the Pro model. And this is where I want to really use Pro model, because what if the kid asks me about shooting like Ovechkin? Will it know who Ovechkin is? That's kind of an example of where you would need to be creative and you would need to maybe use a tool. But I'm going to actually argue that for chatbots, what you really want to do is actually use Flash models. So for those of you that guessed Flash, good on you. And my reason for that is that with these lighter weight models, whether it's Gemini Flash or DeepSeek or whatever it is that you're using, you really don't want the conversation to kind of have no guardrails and be non-context specific to your app. So this is where, if you've ever heard retrieval augmented generation or tool calling, this is kind of where these chat agents kind of start to thrive, is if they have those boundaries and those specific things around them. So for example, I'm going to now ask Puck Buddy a quick question. So I'm going to ask it, tell me about Tom Cruise. Okay. So what you'll notice here is that Puck Buddy cannot tell me about Tom Cruise, and that's intentional. If I was using a Pro model and the goal of this was to make AI Jake DiBattista, maybe I would want it to be able to scrape all my profiles, be creative, give an answer that I trust. But this is an app that, potentially a 7-year-old could use, but more likely their parents are going to use. And we really want to keep that conversation guarded and around what it's good at, because we know that our app is good at hockey coaching. We really want to say, hey, you have access to this data source. This is what the data means. That's your specialty. And because it's a limited context, that's why we can get away with Flash. So now, for example, I'm going to say, tell me about my worst metric and how to improve it. And what you're going to see here is not only is this going to be fast because, it can keep the context window limited, but it's going to be able to do, kind of keep this conversation relevant. So for example, it looks at my front leg bend, which if I go to my scorecard was in fact the lowest metric there. And it's going to tell me about how I can improve that and how through each score, what was going well or where to look in the video. So this is why I think Flash models for most chatbots are going to be good. And you're better off kind of just tailoring the agent rather than giving it a huge creative and deep thinking context window. So anyways, let me know what you think. Let me know how you're using models. Again, I only use Gemini 3 Pro for those most complex things, like really thinking through how do I break down a video. And I use the Flash and the flashlight for the much simpler things, text summary, even conversations, things like that, and audio generation. So I hope this is helpful. Hopefully this taught you a little bit about how I use models and how as app developers, we can translate these models into features.